Welcome to this special meeting of the Avon Plan Commission. We are here tonight to receive a presentation of the 2025 comprehensive plan that has been put together for us after several weeks and months of thoughtful consideration and input from the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee, of which 4 members of this commission were participating. So that is why we're here tonight. And without any further ado, unless there's something else that needs to be said, let's jump right into it. And just for the purposes of protocol, if you could give us your name and address.
Sure. Can you hear me? Am I on? Or do I need to green? It's red.
Press the
Okay, now people can hear me. I'm official now. All right, my name is Rachel Christensen. I work with HWC Engineering. Do we want my business address? I don't know if I know it. We're on Pennsylvania Street in downtown Indianapolis. Does that work? Okay, thanks. All right, well, thank you so much for having us tonight. We're really excited to talk about the comprehensive plan with everyone. Like Catherine said, we've been working on this for several months now. There's been a lot of thought and effort into this. So tonight, I guess I can start using my PowerPoint presentation. That would help? All right, I'll get into the swing of things at this lectern. So I'm going to give you tonight just a brief comprehensive plan overview, tell you why we do comprehensive plans, why they're important to Avon. I'll tell you a little bit about the planning process. So what did we do from day one all the way through this public work or this public presentation tonight? I'm going to tell you a little bit about the community engagement that we did throughout the process. I'll give you a brief plan summary. You may be disappointed to know that I'm not going to go word or page by page tonight through the document. We would be here forever. And then I'm just going to give you some next steps on things to expect, how you can give feedback prior to the adoption process. All right, so we're going to jump in with the plan overview. And, we just want to make sure that people are understanding why we're even here tonight. I know as Plan Commission members, you guys are familiar with a comprehensive plan and why we do one, but for our members that are, coming in online or in the audience, we like to kind of make sure everyone's on the same page. So this is a long-range guide for development and community investment. This is kind of your blueprint for the future, your playbook for the future. There's 3 things per Indiana law that are required to be in a comprehensive plan. So they come in all different shapes and sizes, but we must have objectives for future development. We need to have policy for land use development, and we also have to have policy for the development of public ways, lands, and utilities. A document like this is used by, of course, Plan Commission members. It's also used by your town council, your city staff, community organizations, property owners, while they're making decisions about land use. Also transportation, utilities, and more. I like to say that it's kind of like a welcome mat to your community. It's almost like an advertisement for your community on who you are and who you want to grow up to be. The purpose, when we do this planning effort, we really look at evaluating the existing conditions of your community. So we look at demographics, we look at your assets, we look at your wonderful parks that you have, and we kind of do an inventory of everything that's going on within Avon. And then we try to work with that plan commission or the steering committee to establish clear vision and goals for the future. And then we identify recommendations that translate that vision and goals into those actionable projects and initiatives. And that's really the most important part, I think, of a planning process is that, it's not something that is an inactionable document. We want to make sure that we're giving you a tool that you can use, that there's clear steps in it, and there's a clear pathway on how to move those steps forward. So we're going to dive into the overall planning process now. So we had a 4-phased process that's outlined here on the screen. The first one, we started this back in April of 2024. We got our steering committee set up. The steering committee was members of the community. And we did a lot of data collection and demographic profile, like I talked about a little earlier. And we actually met with that steering committee to kind of go over everything and kind of talk about what direction do we want to go as a community? What are the top issues that are happening in Avon? We also developed a public engagement strategy, which kind of brings us into phase 2, which is the reach a consensus phase. We developed a project website. If you haven't been on it yet, it's plancommissionagenda.gov. We did a video intro on there. We had an online public input survey, a workshop. We did a pop-up event, a lot of different ways that we engaged with the public in many different methods. So some were in person, some were online, so that everyone, regardless of your ability, you could participate in the planning process. We then, kind of rounded out that phase with a public participation report, and then moved into the forming the plan phase, which kind of started in October of last year. We produced an existing conditions report. We met with that steering committee multiple times in this phase where we had a land use workshop where we looked specifically at, the old future land use map, and then what do we want to do for the new future land use map. We dove into focus area plans, which I'll talk about later in this presentation. We had a big ideas open house where we shared the information that we had learned from the reach a consensus phase. We shared it back with the public to say, hey, did we hear this right? Are there things that we need to tweak before we move forward? And then we did produce that first draft of the comprehensive plan. So now we're kind of rounding this all out in the last phase, the practical action steps. So we've developed an action plan. We presented a lot of materials at that last steering committee that we had, and we've produced that public draft. So that's out and on the website now. At this point, we're doing a public presentation to give, obviously, a presentation tonight to talk about everything that's been done and the next steps. And then this will go into the adoption phase, which all comprehensive plans, they start with the Plan Commission making a recommendation to the Town Council. So it's a 2-step process. So after tonight, we'll take any feedback that the Plan Commission has, that the public has, and we'll integrate that into the final draft of the plan and take that to the Plan Commission to consider and to make a recommendation to the Town Council on whether or not to approve it. And then the Town Council will have that final decision on if the plan gets adopted. All right, community engagement overview. So like I said earlier, we had several methods that we chose to get public input on. We did an online survey, which had 607 responses, which was fantastic. We did a public workshop here in this room, and we had about 16 participants, but they gave excellent feedback and guidance to us. We did focus group discussions, which in total we had about 27 participants in those. We did a pop-up event and had 122 comments that we received during that pop-up event. And we also had that project website that I talked about. And at the time that we kind of wrapped up that second phase, we had 268 views on that. But that number has greatly increased since then. And just some feedback. There's on the online survey, there were some open-ended responses. And, some of these comments were maybe the ones that stood out, that people wanted more trails. There's a lot of pride. They want more pride in their community. They liked being able to have their voices heard. US 36 comes up in every form of public engagement that we did, which is not a shocker. My team even had challenges at times getting to meetings. We had some people that would come in a little bit late and were like, US 36. So that was a little bit that we got back on the online. The public workshop, we had boards around this room and people were able to look at the questions that we had for them and give us feedback. People are wanting sidewalks. There was a lot of comments about how the community looked and almost like a branding, and we want to make things look better. But there's people who love Avon as well. I love my beautiful neighborhood, rural but close to everything. The focus group meetings, we had several topics that we covered, transportation, parks and recreation. We had one that was jurisdictional relations and utilities, because we know that, we would joke throughout the process that Avon is like Swiss cheese. You have lots of jurisdictions that you have to work with, lots of holes, in your town boundaries. We had one that completely focused on US 36 called All Things US 36. It almost seemed like a Jeopardy category, but we also talked about development ordinances, arts, culture, and placemaking, economic development, and also housing and neighborhoods. And those we had, maybe your local experts in your community that came in and, we asked them questions, we engaged with them, and we were able to take a deeper dive into those topics. We also had a pop-up event. We went to one of the festivals, and it was really fun and really well attended. We had candy because it was close to Halloween. There was kids that came, had some really hilarious comments that they left us, but then we had, other people in the community that left us some really great comments as well, liking the community events that bring people together, wanting more amenities for special need populations, kids wanting to do things after school and having many, more activities or businesses or things that they could do after school. So in all of that public engagement that we received, we kind of started seeing some emerging themes. So traffic and transportation challenges, future development and growth management was on everyone's mind, housing options. We know that since the pandemic, the cost of housing has gone up quite a bit. Community identity and placemaking, economic development, parks, rec, and open space. I'd say that, Avon residents love their parks, rec, and open space. And then also that governance and jurisdictional coordination came up to be very important. All right, so like I said, I'm not going to go page by page, but I'm going to give you just an overview of what to expect when you are reviewing the document. So one of the things that we worked with the steering committee on was really developing a strong vision statement, not just for the town of Avon in general, but just to help us guide our goals and strategies that we went on to develop. So this took a lot of wordsmithing with the group, and I think we ended up in a good place with it. The town of Avon is a vibrant, family-friendly town that has a shared commitment to celebrate our quality schools, foster great neighborhoods, and cultivate a healthy economy. We strive to embrace our traditions, support smart land development, and enhance the quality of life through recreation, arts, and culture. Our vision is to create a future filled with possibility, connection, and enduring community spirit. This is aspirational, and it's a feel-good statement. And like I said, this is kind of that guiding statement that helped us when we were developing your goals and your strategies to move forward. The plan itself, I'm going to give you just an overview of the outline. So there's several chapters that are in here. We have an executive summary, the intro, a background and context chapter, community engagement, and then we do an analysis by subject matter. And you can see that there's several chapters then that are the subject matter. So land use, community identity and placemaking, transportation, housing and neighborhoods, parks and open space, economic development, and community facilities and infrastructure. We also do a deeper dive into some special areas of the community that we thought we needed to do a little more investigation on, which we call them focus areas. And then we also have an implementation chapter within the document. So one of the major things in that comprehensive plan that is required by law is this future land use map, talking about how we see the future land use of Avon. And what we did was we really looked at your existing future land use map. And I think since the last time that this plan was put together, I think we had some challenges with this map. There were some gaps in it. There's areas that we've definitely focused on from the last plan that I think had some challenges for the Plan Commission and also planning staff whenever new things were coming that were not in one of those color areas. So that was one of the things we wanted to do a little bit differently this time. We also changed some of the titles of kind of those districts that were showing up in what is right now your current plan that will be replaced with this plan. So that was kind of where you guys started, where you started. And what we did is we worked with the steering committee then to look at the entire community, the incorporated boundaries, of course, on what that future land use could look like, because there are areas that could be redeveloped in the future. What we also thought was important as a steering committee, as a group, was to look at those areas that were those Swiss cheese hole areas too. So not just looking at, what was today in the town of Avon, but what could be in the future town of Avon. I think one of the priorities is maybe filling some of those gaps, because those gaps make it really confusing for residents on who to get a permit from if they're coming to town of Avon or if they're going to go to the county level to get their permits. So we wanted to make sure that we were planning for those areas. And then we also looked kind of outside of those Swiss cheese areas, looking outside to see, if there's areas that we might want to annex in the future, what could that land use look like? So you can see that it definitely goes beyond the boundaries of today's Avon. and kind of looks at those future areas as well. Future land use map, this is a great tool for the Plan Commission and staff, just to make sure that, because we've had public input on this, which has been really helpful. And this helps give you guys a solid ground on making decisions for the future when someone is coming in asking for a rezone. And this is where you can really make some solid decisions on if it is appropriate for Avon to rezone a parcel using this as a tool. Another thing that we did that is different from your existing comprehensive plan is that we did a deeper dive into land use classifications for you. I think that was one of the challenges from your previous comp plan, is that the categories, those land use classifications, were not as defined as maybe what the staff would like today. So we did look at giving a better description of the categories. We even looked at all the categories in general to make sure that they were still appropriate for today. And we decided to change some of those and add new ones in. So what you'll see in the plan is the updated land use classifications. They each have a description. And then there's a list of the primary uses that are generally supposed to be in that district, secondary uses, and then we have some additional notes that go along with that. So the new land use classifications, we have an agricultural classification, residential, a mixed use, a commercial and office, light industrial, institutional, parks and open space, and then a floodplain classification as well. The parks and open space and the floodplain don't necessarily have as much description and primary and secondary uses because there's not a lot of growth and development that can happen in those districts. Something to note on the residential land use classification, we did do a deeper dive to give more guidelines. If I flip back to the future land use map real quick, you can see that we have one primary residential district. And this could be challenging if we didn't have additional guidelines for what type of residential is appropriate in different areas. So the way that we decided with the steering committee to handle this is to have these district guidelines for residential. This is one where there's different guidelines that are laid out depending on where this residential could go. So if it is residential that is close to a arterial road or a collector road, there's some guidance on what the density what densities would be appropriate for those areas. If it's close to a future transit line, a future trail line, a park, a school, that has an influence on what that density could look like. And that's the way that, we worked through that and chose to handle it for this comprehensive plan update. So that is something new and different to take a look at when you're doing your review of the document. Once you get into those subject matter chapters, I'm going to give you just an example of, the future land use chapter. So each chapter has a series of goals. There's the goal in blue, and then we have kind of a description of why that goal is important to Avon. And then we go into strategies in your action plan. So there's different strategies on how we accomplish that goal, and then there's action steps on how you accomplish that strategy. We identified implementation leaders, so who are the people in town that are going to be the ones responsible for pushing those strategies or those action items forward. And then what is the priority? And we list out, if it's a high priority, it has the 3 dots. If it's a medium priority, it's got 2. And if it was a low priority, it got 1 dot in there. So that's kind of how to read the implementation and action steps. Like I said earlier, we also did a deeper dive into some focus areas in town. Let me get my notes on these. So as part of our plan, we had 4 focus areas that we were going to be focusing on with this comprehensive plan update, although we have identified 6 different districts in Avon. The first is the Riverwalk District, and that's the area that's around Easton Gray, the Easton Gray development. There's the Greenway District North, which is newly identified with this plan. However, we didn't do a deep dive into what that looks like. We have the Greenway District South, the Midtown District, a revitalization district, and also a live-work district. And when you get to this chapter of the plan, there is an overview of what that district, a description of the district. It gives some design principles It also has a conceptual plan and then some precedent imagery that goes along with that. So it really helps paint the picture of, what we heard from the public, what we talked about with the steering committee, and what that vision is moving forward for those focus or those district areas. This is a map that shows those 6 districts. It looks really pretty. The green area to the bottom left, that is the Greenway District South. The blue area just north of the green is the Riverwalk District. The yellow area is if I can read, the Greenway District North. And then the orange area is the Midtown District. The red is the Revitalization District. And then the purple is that Live Work District. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview of each of the districts because they're fun. So the first one that I want to talk about is this Revitalization District area. This is along US 36. It goes from Raceway Road to Cobble Springs Drive. This is an area that we really thought we would focus on because there are some revitalization needs in the area. It's a little bit of an aging commercial area. It's really interesting to me because a lot of the development that has happened on US 36 was done before you were even a community, an incorporated community. So, what does this look like now that we're kind of getting to these life cycles of these buildings and these shopping centers? What does this look like? And you guys have this exciting opportunity to really give some guidance on what that looks like for the future. So this is a really fun district that we worked on. There's parking areas, which, 30 years ago, zoning ordinances required a ton of parking, and now zoning ordinances are kind of scaling back on the amount of parking that's needed. So what do we do with those spaces that aren't being used like they may have been required in the past? And there's a lot of mixed use that is getting talked about in this district as well. And then this is just some of the precedent imagery that you'll find in that section. The next area is the Midtown District area. This one, I would say, was formerly, if you guys were part of working on the Gateway District, I don't know if this group had worked on that as much, but when we talked with staff, there was a lot of talk about the Gateway District. And so we talked about, is that an appropriate name moving forward into the future? And it turns out we thought Midtown District would be a more appropriate and a better description of where this is actually located. This is going to be more of a pedestrian-friendly development along US 36. It's a transition area between the Revitalization District to the east and the Riverwalk District to the west. It goes, of course, along US 36 from Production Drive to Queensway Drive. And again, this is more focused on being pedestrian-friendly. It's a mixed-use area where you'll find townhomes, upper-level residential, restaurants, retail, offices, open space, that sort of thing. And I want to point out, too, that these district areas, they're for redevelopment. This is not saying that the town is going to go bulldoze anything tomorrow. That is not what this means. But as properties are coming up to be redeveloped, we're trying to establish that vision so that at the end of the day, the town of Avon is reaching goals. So this is some of the precedent imagery of what could be in that district. And then our third one is the Greenway District. And this one we're focusing on the south area of that Greenway District. This is really probably one of the more exciting districts from my opinion or my perspective, because we're introducing a Greenway-oriented development to Avon. This district would extend along the White Creek Corridor from Brownsburg to Plainfield. And we're focusing on active lifestyles. So, a lot of communities have old rail lines that they convert into a trail. And this is really using the creek corridor as that trail area. And so having development that kind of uses that has, maybe some higher density in areas, but then preserving open space in other areas is all concepts that we've put into this district. The west side of this district, you can see, is an agricultural area. And that one, we had to talk a lot about, this area. If we wanted to have, say, for the future, it would be a certain type of residential, or if it would be agriculture still. We pulled it out, we pulled it back in. And where we landed up was, let's have it as agriculture for now, because we want to make sure that, this area stays what it is, similar to what it is today. And when the town is ready to develop it in the future, then let's take a look and say what it needs to be. But right now is just not the right time. And here's some precedent imagery. You can see, there might be some townhouses that are walkable, mixed-use density neighborhoods. They might be oriented to the greenway, and having kind of those natural amenities that go along with it. And lastly is the Live Work District. This district is on the northeast side of Avon along the Ronald Reagan Parkway, north of IU Health West Hospital. The steering committee envisioned this as an innovative district with transformative uses. So there would be a mixed-use component to this with restaurants, retail, hotel, townhomes, condos, medical, and professional offices. And this district would really be targeting professionals seeking more of an urban or a more than a suburban lifestyle, I guess, within walking distance of their jobs. This would connect to the B&O Trail, and there is some industrial in that purple area on the west side of Reagan for logistics, distribution, warehousing, and light manufacturing. And here's just some precedent imagery of what structures could look like in that district. All right, now that you guys have your Cliff's Notes version of the draft comprehensive plan, I'm going to give you your next steps on what to expect. So the public review of the plan is now open. So this is not a done deal by any means. We need you, the Plan Commission members, and the members, the residents of Avon, to take a look at the plan and look through it and see if there's anything that we've missed, if there's anything that needs to be changed. We need to know that. And we need your feedback by August 1st of this year. Because the game plan is that we would like to take this to the Plan Commission at the August 25th meeting, and then hopefully have some type of a determination to take to the Town Council on the September 11th meeting. So that is our best case scenario. Of course, sometimes, with comprehensive plans, we need a little time to think about them, and that's okay. So if we need to adjust the schedule at all, we will, and those would be, I think you guys advertise your agendas, so the public would be well aware of when the adoption process would be taking place. And with that, I think that concludes my presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And if I'm not able to answer the question tonight, I will definitely get back with you on an answer. So.
Thank you. That was very good.
Thank you.
You took a lot of information and really summed it up nicely for us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Appreciate that. Questions about our little plan here?
I know every community is different, but there are similarities. How do we compare to other communities that you've done work for in the past?
Wow.
I mean, are we way out there or?
So out there. No. You guys are the youngest community that I've worked with. I think that's a really neat thing. And I think your steering committee has been one of the best ones that I've worked with. And not just because you were on it, Greg, but it was the public engagement that we got and the steering committee feedback. We had some really tough conversations throughout this planning process. And I was very impressed with the leadership in the room, how those comments and discussions were handled, because they were not easy at all. We got stuck on that land use map for a while and really had to have really some hard conversations. But I was just super impressed by the respect that the steering committees had for one another, and being able to communicate clearly as to why someone felt a certain way, and receiving that in a way that we really, I feel like, came out of those meetings and we're in a good place. Maybe not everyone was 100% happy and got 100% of what they wanted, but I think we all walked away thinking we did a good job for the town of Avon. So I think that's maybe the number one thing that stood out to me about Avon, and you guys should be very proud of yourselves for that, because as a young community, coming into something like that where you've not had a ton of practice or whatnot is, I think, something to be very proud of. And I think you guys have great ideas too. So I think, again, this was one of the more fun plans that I've been able to work on, having that excitement and the vision for those different focus areas, those districts. How do we take all these things that maybe were a patchwork quilt that came together when you guys incorporated, and how do you now really make them all gel together? That's a really exciting thing that this Plan Commission and the Town Council gets to work on in the future.
So in the meetings with the public, did you get questions about, well, how is Avon going to accomplish everything you have in the plan here, and helping them understand this is aspirational, this is a 20 to 40-year plan, not an immediate plan?
Yeah, and I would say that is obviously a common challenge in all communities, that you have this plan and people are like, this is never going to happen. And I think that what we talked about with the public that was engaged with this process is, no, it's not going to be an overnight thing. And the way that it's laid out in this plan may not be exactly what it looks like in 20 to 30 years, but this does give the town a really good starting point on that aspirational vision, because if we don't have a plan in place, you may not get to where you want to go. So I think those were good conversations that we had with the public along the way.
What do you see now, having spent a year and a half or so with us and getting to know our community? What do you see as some of the biggest challenges we face as a community?
Sure. One of them, I think, is that you are not in control of your utilities. And I think that is something we did identify. You guys knew that already. You didn't need me to help you identify that. But I think we're trying to come up with some strategies in this comprehensive plan so that the town can be more in the driver's seat rather than the utilities, just being in the driver's seat. That it really needs to be a partnership that we're working together on, and how do you build those relationships with the utility companies so that we are doing land use and development that does make sense for, the future of Avon, your budgets, your infrastructure, your staffing, and things like that. That all is influenced with utilities. So I think that was maybe one of the number one things was a takeaway. And I also think US 36, of course, that's like the big elephant in the room, right? That that is a lot of people's first impressions of Avon is they're coming in on US 36 and they're driving through, and when you get off of US 36, you guys have some really nice streets and some really cool neighborhoods. So how do you get all of that really cool stuff that you have off of US 36 and have it more reflected on US 36, I think will be a big challenge. And we've put some language in that plan to help start addressing that. And again, that's something that's kind of out of your hands too, because it's a relationship with NDOT that you have to build to be able to show them your vision, your local vision for US 36 when it's a roadway that they control. Great questions. And I'm glad I had answers.
I know when we started this, I thought we had some zoning loopholes and we had some pocket land use issues. Do you think we've addressed those in here? I haven't read it yet, so.
I think you have. And I think another piece of it is, your next step beyond this, I think, is revisiting your ordinances to make sure that the things that you are striving for in your comprehensive plan are then getting articulated the way you want them to in your ordinances, so that we are getting that built product at the end of the day. So, comp plans and ordinances, they need to go hand in hand. When you update one, you need to take a look at the other. So I think that's a best practice. And what I would recommend as a next step in this is really taking a look at that to make sure everything's buttoned up.
Any other questions? Comments?
I have one more thing, if that's okay. But I want to say too that Linda and Paul coming on board, when HWC first got hired for the process, it was not Linda and Paul that were here. There was a transition period going through, and to watch how much the two of them have grown since we started working with you guys, and having them get acclimated to Avon, and going from that first day, Linda, and you were kind of like, okay, you were drinking water from a fire hose, and now at the end of the process, she's zeroing in on the details that are important to Avon and being able to show. And so I just think that you guys made some good hires and they're paying attention to the details and, going to bat for the things that they're learning are important to Avon. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
You're
That
welcome.
was a very informative and easy to understand summary.
Yes. The website is plancommissionagenda.gov. And if you go to that homepage and scroll down just a little bit, there's a button that says view the draft plan here. And you can get on there and look at the draft plan. You can download it, you can print it. And then as we get to the final end of that, we'll make sure we're posting final schedules and things like that. So it's a one-stop shop for information. Yes. Yeah, there is a page for comments. So, like most websites, there's a box where you can type in your thoughts and then hit a button and it will send it directly to me so I can review it. And if it needs to go to staff, we can send it to staff or the Plan Commission. Great question.
And our next step is to come back in August to the next Plan Commission meeting.
Yes.
Where you will, I'm assuming, summarize what we've already done today, and then the Plan Commission will vote for a recommendation to approve.
Yes.
Which will then be forwarded to the town council.
Yes, and that meeting will need to be advertised as a public hearing for the comprehensive plan, so that it will be a formal public hearing that the public is encouraged to make comment, so that the Plan Commission can hear any concerns or support for the project.
Okay.
All right. Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
So I am not sure there's anything else we need to do. That's why we had our meeting, our special meeting tonight. So if there's anything that anyone would like to say or contribute before we wrap things up, this would be the time to do it.
Appropriate to see if the people in the audience have any comments?
Is there any objection to that? This is a little different than the way we normally run things, but is there anybody present who would like to speak briefly about what you heard tonight? Feel free to come step forward. No? All righty. Well, that being said, then I think we're done. Meeting adjourned.